Hi, this is Jeff. I recently decided to upgrade my IL-2 gaming experience from IL-2 1946 to IL-2 Great Battles. I bought the Battle of Bodenplatte game, which is one of 4 games currently in the series, which came with 8 flyable aircraft and the option to buy more flyable aircraft. I counted 53 World War II aircraft in the game, along with a dozen World War I aircraft, and there's even tanks and other vehicles. Compared to IL-2 1946, what I notice is missing is some of the older aircraft types. For example, the oldest Bf-109 is an E-7, the oldest Spitfire is a Mark V, the oldest American aircraft are a P-40E and a P-47 D-22 Razorback. One nice thing about this new game is this IL-2 BOS viewer. You can modify the skins on the aircraft and then quickly look at them with this viewer in different light conditions to see what the matte finish looks like, how it reflects light. Here's a default P-51 skin that came with the game, and you get an idea of what the graphics look like. I actually went to an IL-2 forum site and downloaded dozens of aircraft templates. These are layered templates that give you the option to create your own skins or use skins that are already in the template by enabling or disabling some of the layers. Each template comes as 2 files, an aircraft name.psd and an aircraft name _alpha.psd. If the PSD template is modified using GIMP, then the template is saved as a standard GIMP project file with a .xcf file extension. So for example, if I look at my GIMP photo editing tool, this is a template for a P-51 D-15. I, just for kicks, added the squadron code HO and P. I only spent about 5 minutes doing this. It was fairly easy to do, although I have to confess I spent days ahead of time trying to find all the templates, and it seems like the locations of templates was changing quite a bit since this game came out in 2014 and a lot of stuff wasn't initially available, but now 8 years later the templates are there. I have some experience with GIMP too from playing IL-2 1946. I spent a year or two creating my own aircraft skins using the older tool. The new aircraft skins are about 22 megabytes compared to 3 megabytes for the old skins, and there's a lot more detail, which is very much appreciated. Looking at the menu over here, you can see the layers that come with the template. Suppose I didn't want a blue nose Mustang. I could just go up here and disable the blue nose, and if I preferred a checker nose Mustang, I could do this. If I don't like the US emblems, I could replace them with some British emblems. And then it's a matter of just exporting. So to export, you just flatten the design. I'll try to go through this without taking too much time. Flatten the design, and there's a procedure in the IL-2 forum for doing this. I'll provide a link to how to get the templates currently. It may change in the future. So then I have to add this layer mask. This is in a written procedure. I've already got it set up for channel and alpha 1, so you just click add. Adding the layer mask to the DDS file makes the DDS file more transparent, and it determines the reflectiveness of different parts of the aircraft. From there, I would just go to the File menu and Export. I can say Export As. You can give it a name. I want to change this to a DDS file, which is what the game expects. And to use DDS files, you have to download a DDS add-on to GIMP. How to get the add-on is described in a link I'll attach. So I would hit Export. And this is, well, it's not set up. So for compression, it's recommended to use DXT5. Bitmaps are useful. So now if we go back and we want to look at this file, this might be good, knowing where the skins folder is in the game. You can just search for skins. All right, so I added the skin file I just created. So going back to the IL-2 viewer, I can just select the skin that I created. You can see there's quite a few skins that I've downloaded. Normally the game comes with maybe 8 or 10 skins per plane, and I've downloaded all these other skins from the IL-2 forum. They usually come as a zip file, and after unzipping, they're about 22 megabytes each. These are 4K files. Here's the new aircraft. Anyway, I guess I'm not going to mess with it now because this view looks fine for me, but you can simulate other lighting conditions. So if I hit play animation, the Mustang comes to life. You can see the propeller pitch changing. All right, I can pause the animation and bring up another skin. I looked at the BF-109 F4 skin that came with the game. You see all the aircraft that are selectable. These aren't all flyable, but they're all viewable. This might be a good thing for modelers to, instead of building models that take up space, just create your models in the digital world and store them on a flash drive or something. These templates are pretty huge files, though. They're like half a gigabyte each. The flattened version is about 22 megabytes. So they do take up quite a bit of memory. When I downloaded the game, I thought it was going to need about 62 gigabytes, but it ended up needing about 82 gigabytes. Although right now it's only 66 gigabytes, and that's after I downloaded some skins too. Maybe some of the compressed files were deleted. Here's an F4. And I should mention that I believe this template was created by a guy named Francisco Bindraban. He's in Spain, I believe, and on the IL-2 forum, he's Black Hellhound 1, and he seems to have taken it upon himself to redo all the rivets in the template. That seemed like a big project to take on. There are bump maps that are part of the game that determine where the rivets are, and Francisco apparently is able to create his own bump map that you can add to the game. Let's see if we look at this real closely. You can see some of the rivets and the screws. One area where I used bump maps was on the P-51s. I thought the Phillips head screws that were on the cowling were out of place. I think they used the quick release slotted type screws, which are a little bit bigger than the ones that are shown here. So I created my own, and I used the bump map to do that. Here's my version of the cowl screws. You can see they're a little bit larger than the Phillips head screws that were there. I made them all pointing with the slots rotated in a different direction. Here's the bump map for the P-51D. Here's what the cowl screws originally looked like. They were Phillips head and kind of small. This is my modification to the bump map. What I could have done was, like with these Phillips head screws, to make it more three-dimensional to show the actual slot opening in the screw. But it seemed like too much work for me because all the slots are rotated in different directions. So instead I changed the alpha layer. This layer determines the reflectivity of various surfaces on the aircraft. Originally it looked like this with Phillips head screws. I changed it to look like this because it was easier for me to copy the screws that are on this main aircraft skin and just paste them into the alpha skin and then change the colors to grayscale. That was a lot less work than actually showing every slot in the bump map. Here's what the entire alpha layer looks like. The darker gray areas are going to be less reflective, so that's where the paint is. The lighter areas are where the natural aluminum surfaces, although some of that aluminum was painted as well. The downside of aircraft with lots of natural metal surfaces, if the whole thing was, say, olive drab, I could make the whole fuselage one shade of gray since it's all got the same reflectivity. But that's not the case for aircraft with a lot of aluminum. So then each aircraft letter has to be shown as a darker shade of gray. I also made the same changes to the bump map and to the main paint layer of the P-51B. Another thing I thought I'd talk about on the main layer of the aircraft skin is the way I've been adding exhaust stains. I noticed with the 109 skins that there's 5 separate layers for exhaust stains with various levels of prominence for the exhaust stain. I think I found a simpler way to do that, and that's just creating one exhaust stain and then just changing the opacity of it to make the stain lighter or darker. And I try to change it on each aircraft. So if I make 4 aircraft in a flight, I'll try to change the exhaust stains on each one of them. So here I'm going to change the exhaust stain from 30% opacity to 100%, and you can see it becomes more prominent in this area here. Another thing I did for the P-51 was had the option to change the engine vent. Some aircraft had covers over the engine vent. I can unselect that, and now I've got a cover plate that... Alright, I just wanted to open a bump map that has the engine vent in it. Apparently I had to make several different versions of bump maps, some with and without the engine vent. So here's one that's with it. And note the path name. I don't know how well this is going to be readable in the recording, but the bump maps are in this folder: data, graphics, planes, the aircraft name, and textures. And the bump maps are DDS files. All right, so looking at the main surface layer, this is what the engine vent looks like. Maybe if I zoom out a bit. Also, there are several layers in the bump map. So these MIP maps are for more zoomed out views of the aircraft. Saves computer resources by having smaller numbers of pixels for aircraft that are farther away in a scene. So I think by the time we get down to MIP map 2 and further, all the details related to cowl screws and engine vents are pretty much not visible. So how it looks in the viewer. You can see what the cowl screws look like in their original form. Shows the light reflectivity. You can see the depression from the Phillips head slot. Here's how it looks with the modified P-51D. You can see the slots around here. So even though I didn't change the bitmap to make a 3D view of the slot, it's still pretty visible. That's my personal experience with bump maps. I was going to look at a Desert 109 F4 flown by Marseille, and there was a version of that that came with the game. So I'm going to select that. There were a few things I thought, heck, I'm a modeler and I've got my own skins for my models and my own decals for things like this one JG27 emblem. This looks like a fairly simple emblem to me. It's great resolution, nice and clean looking, but I've actually got photographs of some of Marseille's aircraft. I've got a photograph of Marseille's 14 next to the cross, and I noticed the fuselage cross in what I believe is Marseille's aircraft. He flew a bunch of them, maybe a half a dozen 109Fs. But fuselage cross didn't have a black outline, so that's something I would want to change. I'm not sure that that's wrong for this particular aircraft since he flew so many, and it was hard to tell from the photograph which one it was. Also, there's a nice photograph of the tail that shows a lot of detail, and it looked a bit different from this one. First of all, it only had about 130 some victory markings, and the swords appeared to be yellow, although it was a black and white photo and hard to tell. For this, I guess there's a lot of countries in Europe and Russia that make it illegal to display this type of swastika in public. I've modified templates for about a dozen aircraft in 2 days. I had to add swastikas to all the aircraft myself. There was no option to put them in there. However, I think you can download these DDS files from the IL-2 forum, and people have provided those downloads in two different formats, either the no swastika or the swastika versions. Going back to some of the photographs, here's somebody actually painting the unit emblem on a JG-27 aircraft. And I took that photo, which was in color even, which is nice. Hopefully it's not colorized. I don't think so. And I stretched it in GIMP to make it circular, and I changed some of the colors, cleaned up the edges to make them sharper. And I think this is a pretty authentic image. It seems like since these are hand painted, no two images are exactly the same. Here's another version of an image. The leopard's head looks slightly different in this one. It's got a red tongue, presumably it's red, and the head is separated from the rest of the body by a clearly marked line. You can see here the line is broken. Anyway, there's some subtle differences, and then the face has more detail in this second emblem that I found than in this first one. I think these look better than the template that came with the game. No offense to whoever made that template. So I incorporated them in my version of this. I had to shrink the image a little bit, so lost some resolution. This is what it looks like in GIMP. Originally, when I started this video, I showed the original aircraft that comes. If you just take the template and create a DDS object file from it, you get that version of the 109 that looked like it was for the Russian front with all the yellow bands on it. I was thinking I'll try to change it by just deselecting a few things, and without making any changes at all, except I added the swastika, I just output this, and that only took 15 minutes or so to create another swastika. I took this image in GIMP from the template and modified it to get that Marseille aircraft, and this was my version of the Marseille aircraft. I changed a few things. I changed the serial number to be 6673. It was 8673. I know, minor stuff. A good shot of Marseille's tail. There are less victories here, and swords that were white in the template that came with the game look like they're the same color as the laurel wreath, which I'm assuming is a yellow color. And the serial number, it's hard to see. It looks like 6673 to me, not 8673. There's a panel line that goes through here that might make it hard to tell. So anyway, I wanted to make those minor changes. I was also going to look at a poor scanned image of the aircraft number. It looks like one of Marseille's aircraft. The 14 is slightly higher than the fuselage cross, and the fuselage cross has no black outline. Oh yeah, I even changed the ID plate to change the serial number. And back on the emblem. So here's my version of the emblem, which I like a little bit better. I did that on the other side too. Yeah, I think that's about it. If we go back into the GIMP template, these layers can be expanded or compressed again by clicking a plus sign. I was going to look at the weathering. Just a ton of options here. Lots of detail. Leaks, gear oil, water leaks, the glycol, general weathering, game effects, more expansion, gun residue. I added this Marseille layers decal, which I can just click to get rid of. That was just the decals. Maybe one last thing to look at is the animation. You can attach a bomb rack. There's some external guns, some cannons. Pretty cool. And this can all be done by opening this viewer without opening the game. It takes a few seconds to open the viewer. You can check out your changes, see how it looks. If something doesn't align properly, you can go right back into GIMP and fix it, generate a new skin, and try it in the viewer again. It's really nice. I'm going to continue using the IL-2 Great Battles game and see if I can get it to work to possibly make more documentaries. I think there's some pitfalls for the game. Some of the great things are the graphics. The radio transmissions sound better. Some of the concerns are the limited number of aircraft types. There are some bombers in the game. I've noticed Ju-88s, Heinkel 111s. On the American side, there are A-20s and B-25s, but I haven't seen any four-engine bombers. But again, I've only had this game for a week, and I've only flown it a couple of times. I am using an IR head tracker. I've got 2 of them. The Track 5 seemed to work okay. Did my joystick work fine? I have an older joystick. Well, it's been about 7 months since I originally recorded this video. I had a chance to create a few missions for the game, and I found out a few things. One, I was pleasantly surprised. There is the equivalent of a mission builder. There's a mission editor, so I'm still able to create my own missions, and when I make documentaries, I can create scenes, and I might create a dozen different scenes for one documentary. So that's worked out really nice. Aside from the lack of four-engine bombers, the lack of drop tanks seems like a real shortfall of the game, at least for those of us who'd like to do documentaries. The developers are adding new aircraft all the time, it seems like, and new versions of the game, so you get new maps too. Maps were a bit of a limiting factor. There's really only the Rhineland map that I can use with this game. You can wait until the game goes on sale and then buy other versions of the game for less than what I originally paid, which I think was $50, and you can pick up a new map. So I did get the Kuban map and use that for a desert scene. The terrain had been modified by someone in the IL-2 forum, and that was nice to be able to experience something other than Europe. I also found relative to maps that I can modify maps, there's a surface editor that comes in the game, and I actually use that for a modified desert Kuban map because I wasn't really happy with the way the sand looked. So I created my own sand with questionable results. I hear there is a better desert map now that can be downloaded from the IL-2 forum, so maybe I'll get a chance to try that someday. I've created 2 airfields. The first was Manston and the second was Munich-Riem using the surface editor, and that worked out pretty good. I think I'm making progress with that. I had some concern at one time about aircraft formations and limitations there, but with the mission editor I can specify for each group of aircraft what formation they should fly in. I was concerned about the number of aircraft in any given scene being limited to a fairly small number, but I found I could put hundreds of aircraft in a scene similar to IL-2 1946. If the mission is overloaded with aircraft, the mission check will let me know that. And usually the scene will be flown at half speed or maybe even slower than that. But if I record the scene, a lot of times the recorded version will play back at normal speed. Otherwise it looks like the scene is in slow motion, which sometimes works too. Well, I think that's all I have. It's been a lot of fun converting from IL-2 1946 to IL-2 Great Battles.